Fans, welcome inside a Thursday, December 11th edition of the BR NHL Insider Notebook here on the BR app, streaming as well live on YouTube. Let's make this an interactive show. Throw me your questions, comments, concerns, trade proposals, fears, predictions, whatever it is that you've got. Love to talk hockey with you and make this interactive back and forth over the next 30 minutes or so here on the BR app and YouTube. So let's dive in with the biggest topic of the day, the topic that everyone's talking about in the hockey world, and that includes the Canucks locker room, as Coach Adam Foote alluded to with the trade rumors surrounding Captain Quinn Hughes. What is going on? What's the latest? Perhaps the best way I can describe this situation and what's unfolded in Vancouver, and not to pour cold water on anyone's excitement, is that at this exact moment in time, I don't have any tangible evidence that the Vancouver Canucks are working on or engaged in proposals to trade Quinn Hughes as we sit here on December 11th. There have been conversations, there have been teams that have called to inquire about his availability, but from the teams that I've spoken to, they've all signaled that the Canucks have not engaged and have not made Quinn Hughes available. So what did happen? How did we arrive at this point? Well, let's rewind 2 weeks from Monday, and the Vancouver Canucks management sent a note out to all 31 other teams, and they said, we are open and ready to moving veterans off of our roster in an attempt to get younger. The message was a little bit vague in its wording, and so naturally what that incited is for teams to pick up the phone and call the Canucks and ask the question, does that include Quinn Hughes? And they were told no, but as is very typical in sports, but especially in hockey, what those teams that did call and were met with a no was to register their interest. The New Jersey Devils, the Detroit Red Wings, I would include the Washington Capitals, the Philadelphia Flyers. Those teams that called, they said, if you're not moving him now, can you at least keep us in mind for the future when you get around to potentially, or if you get around to having that conversation? That's how those conversations have been characterized to me by people on both sides of the phone. So what does it all mean? Well, the Canucks have been scuffling in the standings. Their coach, as we mentioned, has acknowledged that this is wearing on the team. I think we're all hoping or waiting for the team to step up, and at least from management side, to address this situation, particularly given what the coach said on Wednesday. And we're left with a situation that is of great interest to not just many teams, but many fan bases, because we're talking about a Hart Trophy caliber player that so rarely becomes available in the absolute prime of his career. That is this going to happen before the trade deadline in March? Is this something that waits until the summer? Are the Canucks trying to put their best foot forward and trying to improve their team in the short term to create a more competitive environment to entice Quinn Hughes to stay? Is it definitely New Jersey Devils or bust? I think so many questions don't have answers from the ones that I just put out there. So let's see what you've got to say in our chat. M. Jordan says, the Avs should add Quinn Hughes. That would be so fun. I mean, the rich getting richer, right? Do they really need Quinn Hughes when you already have the other best defenseman in the world in Cale Makar? Feels like a bit of a stretch and probably a need or an itch that the Colorado Avalanche wouldn't need to scratch, given their current lineup. Lynn says, are the Flyers players for Quinn Hughes? And Rick Tocchet making a joke at his press conference on Thursday at their morning skate as they get set to face Carter Hart and the Vegas, well, Carter Hart's not playing, but the Vegas Golden Knights with Carter Hart on the bench. And he was comparing one of his defensemen to Quinn Hughes just in terms of some different attributes. And he said, oh, probably shouldn't talk about that today. And look, the Flyers would be one of those teams without question that would be salivating to get their hands on Quinn Hughes. The disconnect I think that the Flyers would have in being able to make a trade of that magnitude is, think about what the Canucks would want in return. They want a young top-end center to add to their mix. The Flyers are in search of and don't have a young top-end center as part of their franchise profile. So I think that's important to keep in mind as you try and sort out who may be a trade partner and who isn't. Not saying it's impossible. I just think it makes it that much harder that they're both chasing the same thing. Remember, this is a Canucks franchise that a couple short years ago had Bo Horvat, JT Miller, and Elias Pettersson down the middle. That has eroded now to just Elias Pettersson. And with that, the Canucks' chances, their ability to be in the playoffs and be an impact team have eroded with it. Nathan says 100% New Jersey Devils for Quinn Hughes. I mean, in theory, that makes sense because, yeah, the storyline here that everyone wants to see come to fruition, unless you're in Vancouver, is to get three brothers playing on the same team. Put Quinn with Luke and Jack, and away you go. I don't think it's that simple. And again, I'm not being pessimistic here at all. This is just my overall view of the Devils, what they are and what they need. Now you could say, hey, they could absolutely use a Hart Trophy caliber defenseman. I mean, who couldn't? But I start to think of the bigger picture. And remember when the Hughes brothers were advocating for Luke to play number one power play? Would Quinn going to New Jersey cannibalize his own brother's power play time on the Devils blue line? I think that's a fair question to ask. Then the next question is going to be cap hits. Just smashing together the three Hughes brothers overall, you're talking about a huge percentage of cap. Luke is making 9. The next contract for Quinn, I would have to imagine, starts with a 15, so that's 24. Jack makes another 8 plus. That's north of 32. That's 30-some% of your cap in the short term. Yes, that number is going to go down, but for 3 players, it's not insignificant. Then the next part is, okay, think about the other gymnastics that the Devils have to work through in order to achieve something like that. What are they giving up to entice Vancouver? You're going to have to probably pay a premium if you're the Devils. Call it the Hughes brother tax because you've already got 2. It's kind of like thinking about Monopoly. And as you're making your way around the board, if you've got 2 green cards, 2 green properties, and someone has 1, in order for you to buy the 1 from them because they know that you have 2, well, it's not that cheap. And so that's certainly something to keep in mind as well. And maybe a great analogy to think about, particularly with the ties to Monopoly and Atlantic City, New Jersey as well. DC says the Red Wings make the most sense other than New Jersey. He's got family in both places. See, ding, ding, ding. I think this is one that makes a ton of sense. They could really use him on their back end. They have a clear opening and space and need. He grew up in Michigan, went to Michigan. This is a team on the rise, a team that has the assets to give up. They've got a center to give up. I think the Detroit Red Wings are certainly going to be a team to watch whenever we get to that point with Quinn Hughes. Patty says, how would the Devils get Quinn? They already have lots of offensive D-men, and they won't want to trade Nemitz. So Simone Nemitz, I would think, would have to be part of this package going the other way if you're Vancouver, plus whatever you can manage up front. And I think, again, that outlines, okay, when I mentioned the other things that need to happen for New Jersey, well, what about Dougie Hamilton and his inflated salary? How do you get out from under that to start the ball rolling? Then what are you giving up? And then is it like jamming a square peg into a round hole in terms of the fit for your roster? Everyone else wants to chime in. MCOM says the Habs could use him. Everyone can. The Islanders have a great prospect pool. I wouldn't sleep on the New York Rangers as another team that would be potentially very interested. The Caps are another team. What about some other teams? I throw the Chicago Blackhawks into the mix. I'm not saying they're interested, but if you're talking about prospect pool to deal from, they don't quite have a defenseman like Quinn Hughes. No one does really outside of Cale Makar, but they've got great defensive prospects and they've got a couple centers that they could trade from so long as you're probably not moving Anton Frundell. A lot of other young guys could be in the mix. So we'll park the Quinn Hughes conversation for today. My guess is between now and March, we're going to have no shortage of those here on the BR NHL Insider Notebook. Let's talk Olympic arena concerns. Well, they're real. And I just got back from Colorado Springs and the NHL's Board of Governors meetings on Monday and Tuesday. And that was certainly the hot topic of conversation was the construction progress and ice conditions that are expected in Italy. NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly revealed to us on Monday that the new target date for completion for the Milan Olympic Arena is February 2nd. You go, hold on a second here, February 2nd. Oh, wait, the women's hockey tournament starts on February 5th? Wow, that does not make anyone comfortable or leave any margin for error. In speaking with a source who did a recent site visit in Milan, his reaction was when they'd ask questions about the progress, that the response from the Italians constructing the building has been, oh, the games don't start until February. Why do you need it done in January? To which I laugh and I go, that seems very Italian. And I can say that as someone whose last name ends in a vowel. But moving forward, you start to piece together all the different things that need to happen between now and then. A reminder, this is an arena, the largest indoor arena in Italy, that did not have a roof on it as of Halloween. No roof. That's how far away they were for games that were scheduled to start in February. The test event from December in that venue has been pushed back to January. It's January 9th to 11th. And they are optimistic that they will have ice down in a few weeks in that building and be able to pull off the test event in an unfinished arena. So it's not just about the arena, the boards, and the glass itself. It's about team facilities and locker rooms, concessions, bathrooms, lighting, broadcast capabilities, tech, all the different things that go into building an arena, as opposed to just, does every toilet in this arena flush? So what happens here? Well, the other part of it is the ice conditions themselves, because the issue is these are temporary facilities in the sense that when these Olympic Games are over in late February and the Paralympic Games are done, beyond that, that main hockey arena is getting converted back for basketball, handball, and concerts. It will no longer be a hockey arena. They do not have permanent ice plant capabilities. They don't have permanent ice plant capabilities at either of the two practice rinks or the secondary Milan Olympic hockey arena, which is being created out of a convention center that's just open floor space. So the concern there from an ice perspective is you're building temporary rinks using temporary power generation, temporary dehumidification, all these other things that go with it. And it's now going to be asked to be held up to the duress of 3 Olympic Games per day for a 2-week stretch of time, with the best players on the ice in the world beating up this ice. So I understand where the concerns come from in terms of timeline, in terms of ice condition. I'm telling you right now, there is a greater than 0% chance that NHL players do not go to the Olympics in Milan. What is plan B? Well, sources say the NHL, the NHLPA have not had those conversations yet, as they are trying to be a good partner with the IOC and the IIHF. Where it goes from here, I can assure you that despite not saying anything publicly, that some of the smartest people in the sports world are putting their heads together behind the scenes to try and come up with a contingency plan, even though this isn't their tournament. It's not their monkey, not their circus, and they're all trying to figure it out. So they're hoping that the optimism that surrounds the games at the moment, everyone can cross their fingers, and that this will be pulled off in time for what is such a big moment for the sport on the world stage, with Team USA putting together the best Olympic roster it's ever had, going toe-to-toe, hopefully, against Team Canada in the upcoming Olympics. Huge time ahead for the sport of hockey. Let's touch on Phillip Danault and the Los Angeles Kings. I reported over the weekend that trade chatter has picked up in a significant way on Phillip Danault, the stalwart center for the LA Kings. And a lot of people pushed back and said, well, why would the Kings want to trade a shutdown center? Well, there's a few things. One, Phillip Danault has not looked like himself so far this season. Two, There is such a need for centers in the NHL. The center market is so thin that to think that even if Philip Danault has lost a bit of a step in his game to this point this season, that he can be an effective player still in the NHL, and that contract certainly isn't onerous. So I know that a number of teams have inquired about Danault's availability over the last week to 10 days with the Kings. He's been a hot topic of conversation in NHL front offices, and we'll see where it goes on the Phil Danault front. Going back to the Olympic venue, Sports Watcher said, that's crazy. How did it get to this point with the Olympic arena? I don't know, but I must give credit to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, because I was at the GM meetings a couple years ago and he voiced concerns then, like this is calendar years ago, about the Olympic arena progress in Milan. And everyone poo-pooed that notion at the moment, saying, oh, this is maybe just the NHL trying to wiggle out of another Olympics that they might not want to go to. And in the end, he was proven exactly correct, saying that's a lot of work to do to get a building up on time for the Olympics. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. The commissioner was way ahead of it. M. Wilson says the Ducks have a need for a top-end defenseman and have a good prospect pool. Yes, they do, but, I mean, Jackson Lacombe is a top-end defenseman. I have Jackson Lacombe on my Team USA Olympic roster, by the way, for the Ducks. They do have the prospect pool. I also, one reason why I didn't mention very many Pacific Division teams like the San Jose Sharks, they could be a team that could put up some significant prospects for Quinn Hughes. I just don't know if you're trading him in division. And I think the next question you'd have to ask is it a place that Quinn Hughes would ultimately want to re-sign? Because you could theoretically trade for him and have him for 2 playoff runs, and then he goes to free agency. But I think if you're going to be giving up a haul, you'd like to have some kind of assurance that he'd want to be there, or would just make giving up that haul a lot easier to consider doing. And so is it really in Anaheim that he'd want to settle down and put down roots? I don't know that that's necessarily the case. So that's why a team like the Flyers, even if it's not the Devils or not Detroit or not somewhere else, if they could figure out the right deal to bring him in, it's close to New Jersey. The Flyers actually practice in New Jersey. That's where their team facility is. You'd have a budding rivalry with your two brothers, and definitely a better fit from a roster construction standpoint that you could see them spooling it up with his former Canucks coach, Rick Tocchet, and getting better in a hurry with Quinn Hughes at the center of it all. I just think the idea of an in-division trade seems to be a lot. Take a peek at our YouTube chat. We got 2 Erics in here. Eric Martin says, should the Leafs put Carlo and Tanev and Stolars on LTIR and go get a top 6 or a number 1 defenseman? I like your thought process and how aggressive you are, Eric, but what I would say is at some point, all those players need to come off of LTIR, and then what are you going to do? Tanev seems to be the longest one in terms of time out due to injury. And then the next question I would have for you, Eric, is what assets do the Leafs have to give up that they'd really want to give up? Reminder, no number 1 pick this year in 2026. They're not probably trading one of their core forward pieces. So who's left and who's really generating some significant value if you're Toronto to go trade for? That's the challenge for the Leafs. The other Eric W. says, what are the Habs' long-term plans for their 2C? That's a good question. I think from a 3C or potentially 4C standpoint, the Montreal Canadiens are undoubtedly one of the teams contacting the LA Kings on potentially bringing home Philip Danault. But long-term plan is going to be a bit harder to sort out and see. That is certainly a topic of concern or question for the Habs front office that I know they've thought about, and potentially might involve trading from their position of strength on the blue line that they have to fill that void. Interesting thing to keep in mind with the Montreal Canadiens as they hit a significant point of concern, calling up Jacob Fowler. Let's see what the Boston College product has up his sleeve to maybe right the ship for the Canadiens in net. It has been a difficult year from that perspective, as Sam Montembeault, ill of late, sick of late, certainly has not held up his end of the bargain for a guy that was on the Four Nations face-off roster for Team Canada less than 1 year ago. So we talked a lot about the New Jersey Devils, and look, I think, are they a team that's hungry to improve? The answer is yes. Are they an imperfectly built team? The answer is yes. They need to find some additional middle six and bottom six scoring support, because as another season has rolled into multiple games missed without Jack Hughes, what it does is reminds everyone that they're a team that apparently is very over reliant on Hughes when you purely look at their team from a scoring perspective, from an analytics perspective, from a wins and losses perspective. So, which teams could we see getting more active ahead of the NHL trade deadline? Well, I look at 3 deadlines this season. You've got the NHL's annual holiday roster freeze, which is coming up in just over 1 week's time. You've got the Olympic roster freeze, which kicks in on February 3rd. And then you've got the NHL trade deadline in the first week of March. This is a unique year when it comes to activity, and I wonder if in a traditionally quiet December, given that there's a couple of those deadlines, if we don't see a team or two get active between now and then. I think we're all keeping an eye on Vancouver and the market with Kiefer Sherwood. One thing that I was told that does stand out among teams that are interested in acquiring Sherwood is that they believe that extension number to keep Sherwood as a pending unrestricted free agent beyond that is quite expensive. And so there seemed to be some trepidation about what that number might be and how that impacts his trade value on the market, because he's had a great contract year. Double-digit goal scorer quickly once again, hits everything that moves, is a great piece to plug into your middle six. But that next contract certainly stands out, and it would be something to be considerate of at the very least. So the Canucks are one team. We just hit on the New Jersey Devils. I look at the Detroit Red Wings as one that maybe should be a little aggressive. They've won 3 games in a row here, heading into action on December 11th. They sit atop the Atlantic Division in points, if not points percentage, which goes to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And they've taken a huge step forward, but they have a -6 goal differential. I've talked about their needs on their blue line, and their goaltending this season has been poor. So what will Steve Yzerman get up to ensure that the Red Wings break their playoff drought? That just about gets most of the Eastern Conference in terms of some potential shorter term activity. I think the Leafs are interested in doing something, but we just talked about their complications and as it relates to injuries and the salary cap. I think the Dallas Stars are going to be a team to watch at all 3 different deadlines, given the amount of cap space that they have and how well they've played, as they could fill multiple voids both on their blue line and up front with the $9.85 million available to them with Tyler Seguin and his injury. The Ducks are dealing from a position of strength with their cap space flexibility and their prospect pool and pipeline as they sit atop the Pacific Division. And as usual, we've got the Utah Mammoth, who we've talked a lot about, and the Edmonton Oilers, 2 teams that are definitely looking to improve, 2 teams where missing the playoffs this season is not an option. Adam says, Sabres up to anything? I haven't heard of anything, and I think everyone's curious to see what's next. What's the next shoe to drop for a Buffalo team that, once again, bringing up the very rear of the Eastern Conference, as they have a coach who is a dead man walking in the last year of his deal, Lindy Ruff, as well as a general manager who, in Kevin Adams' 6th year at the helm, has not inspired much confidence for a team that has gone in the opposite direction. That'll just about do it for today's edition of the BR NHL Insider Notebook. It was so great to hang with you guys and talk some puck. Lots going on in the hockey world, and we'll be back this time next Tuesday for a 1:30 p.m. edition of the Insider Notebook. Thanks for streaming with us on YouTube as well as the BR app. We'll talk to you next week, and enjoy the games.